Okay.
So we're going out in five. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Tonight, I've got a friend from coming in live from Porterville, California. This is Joe, everyone. He's a
Uh,
graduate from UC Berkeley. Joe, thanks for having me, or thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This is I was really looking forward to this, and been slammed all week. But like I told Summer today, I'm really excited to talk some math, share my experiences, and actually sort of dust off the cobwebs because it's been a little bit since I've actually done some real math and sat down and worked through some ideas and thoughts and whatnot. But we'll see where we go and what we get. But I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I absolutely love talking math, always.
Good, good. Tonight is a nerd out session. For everyone who
Yeah,
doesn't want to hear it, just stop right now. Don't worry about it. For everybody else, let's get started. Joe, what
yeah.
was your backstory into getting into UC Berkeley? That's essentially the last point I remember was you and me in high school, and then you and me just completely went separate directions, and it took a
hmm
few years before we met up again.
Well, I can start. I can start at high school,
Sure.
and we can go from there because that's
Yeah, that's where we were
that's a
together.
that's a that's a discussion in and of itself. So when I was in high school, I hated math. It was the worst. I don't know why anybody liked it, and I was always the kid that was in the classroom going, and everybody said, "Well, this sucks." I'm sorry, the application, but I didn't want to know the application, even though I was asking for it. um, and it was one of those things I thought I knew what I was doing, but when I got the test results back, I clearly had no idea what I was doing. um, so I did that. Then I failed Algebra 2 the first semester of my senior year. Well, I didn't fail. I got a D. And they put me in consumers math at the time, which was bonehead math, as some of the teachers like to call it. And that's what I got put in. And I had fun. And at some point, I realized, okay, I shouldn't be here. But at the time, that is probably where I needed to be. I graduated high school with a like 2.03 GPA. Barely graduated high school. You know, it is what it is. But I was, I don't want to say I was always good with computers because we have, our buddy Anthony Ramos who outshines me immensely. But at the time, I was good in computer networking and I had a lot of fun with it. So my mom hands me a pamphlet one day and says, "I think you should go to CSUB. Here is the curriculum for their computer engineering program." So I said, "This looks really fun." I looked at all the classes, and the classes looked fun. The only classes that didn't look fun were calculus 1, 2, 3, and differential equations, and then linear algebra. I was like, okay, everything else sounds like a lot of fun, but if I'm going to do it, I got to sit down and learn some math. So what I actually did was end up taking a semester off to put my head in the right place, figure out where I wanted to go, if that's actually what I wanted to do. And during that time off, I was actually doing a lot of self-studying for because I realized that once I hit the ground, it was just going to be math for the next 2 years, basically, or 2 years, 4 years, depending on how you look at it. So I started doing it on my own, studying it, and I realized that this is actually a lot of fun because what I was doing was paying more attention to the what and why of math, I guess the theory of it, as opposed to just trying to get what I can and put it in my tool belt and solve the problem. And once I started doing that, it was so much more fun, and it was a much more pleasurable experience. Cue to me going to PC. I didn't get anything less than an A on any of the math classes that I took there, all the way from algebra to diffie-qs. There was always extra credit problems on some of our calculus finals and midterms and exams and everything like that. And it got to the point where, for the finals on all four of the classes from Calc 1 to DiffEqs. I could have put my name on the paper and walked out of there and still passed the class with an A. I had just done immensely well. Not to brag too much, but it was fun, and it was my shtick, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. But prior to finishing all the calculus courses and so on and so forth, I was always set down the path of, okay, I'm going to do engineering. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do, per se. And then once I got to calculus, I said, okay, what engineering field is going to take me in the direction of doing the most math? Where can I actually take on more math? Originally, my thought was, I don't want to do any math, and now I want to do all of it. So my calculus professor, Dr. Gervasi, at the time recommended I should look into electrical engineering. I said, okay, that'd be a lot of fun. So I looked into it, and I looked into it into the sense that I looked at all the math that I would be doing as an electrical engineer, not the actual work of an electrical engineer, as I would put it. And at some point, I just kind of hit a conclusion and just said, "Screw it! I like the math. Why don't I just do that? That's what I'm really here for. This is what I want to do. I'm just going to do the math." And I think one of the aha moments for me in that was we took a numerical approach to showing that the derivative of e to the x is e to the x, and then the antiderivative of e to the x is e to the x, and so on and so forth. But we didn't use any calculus. We didn't use limits or anything like that. We strictly took a numerical approach, and you found as you took that numerical approach, you started with a line that did this, and then you slowly ended up coming here. And I thought, oh my God, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I literally exclaimed in class, I was like, oh my God. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. And I probably am, but it was so much fun. But as far as me getting into Berkeley goes, Berkeley was never on my radar. It was not something I thought I could do, nor even cared to do, because I didn't think I could do it. My heart was actually set on Cal Poly for the longest time. And so I took all the classes that would get me into Cal Poly. Not necessarily get me into Cal Poly, but all of the requirements that they had. They had a lot more strict requirements than all the other CSUs to get in. And right up until that last point, that very final semester where I was going to actually start applying to schools, I was talking to one of the chemistry professors at PC, and I didn't take chemistry. She was just an advisor for one of the clubs that I was in. And she said, you like math, you're good at it, why don't you apply to a UC and see where that can take you? And I said, well, I'd never had any desire to go to a UC, but okay, maybe. Found out I could apply to 4 UCs for free.
Yeah.
So Summer's looking at me like I'm crazy. So I decided to do that.
Another day.
And I applied to UC Davis, UCLA, what was the other one? Santa Barbara. And then I was actually going to apply to UC San Diego. And probably about 30 seconds before I submitted my application, a friend of mine walks through the door and says, "Why are you applying to San Diego? You don't want to go to San Diego. Apply to Berkeley." Well, all right, what the hell? Okay. I'm probably not going to get in anyway. I didn't think I would get into UC San Diego, so what's the harm in, if I don't think I'm going to get into this one, why not apply to the other one I don't think I'll get into? So I did that. And I heard back from every other school prior to Berkeley. Berkeley was the last one to send it to me, and they said, "We'll take you. We will pay for your tuition. The only thing you have to pay for is room and board." And I got a email from a group at UC Berkeley offering to pay for me to go out there, tour the campus, and stay there for the weekend and do all of that. I went there and I absolutely fell in love with it. It was a gorgeous campus, and the students and everybody there were great. And I said, that's it. This is where I'm going. Yeah, it might be a little bit more to live here in comparison to every other place that I applied to, but this is where I want to go. This is where I want to be. And the rest is history.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I didn't know all that backstory beforehand, and
Yeah.
I had no idea you were bad at math for so
Oh,
long.
I was horrid at math.
Yeah, and
But
it all changed. I mean, to go from one side of the spectrum to the complete opposite, you don't usually hear of it that way,
right,
particularly in mathematics. I mean,
right. I still, to this point, in comparison to some of the geniuses that we've had floating around and have floating around, I still wouldn't say that I am good at mathematics, but I am better at it than I used to be, and I think it's so much fun and I love it, which is why I'm good at it now. And actually, probably, maybe I would say fairly good at explaining it to other people in a way that they can also appreciate it and grasp it a little bit. And they may not be able to sit down and write, 20 proofs that night, but they can at least appreciate it. At least I hope they can.
yeah. And I was going to ask, now that we're at Berkeley, now you've said the rest is history. Well, what were your initial impressions once you started digging into the coursework at UC Berkeley?
So the coursework itself was very different. I knew that it was going to be different because going from calculus to, say, abstract algebra, you're going from an applied math course to strictly theoretical now. And that's what I was anticipating, and I wanted to go that route, but Berkeley being Berkeley, they slammed it on you immediately. Proof here, proof here, proof here, no applications, proof here, proof here, proof here. And it was challenging at first, but eventually came up to it and said, this is a lot of fun. This is where I want to be. This is what I need to be doing. This is the work that I've been wanting to do. That's not to say that it wasn't without its challenges, though. It was incredibly difficult, especially my first linear algebra midterm. There was probably 150 people in our course, and there were 4 problems on our first midterm. And of those 4 problems, I solved 1. But it turns out everybody else solved about 1 as well. The average for that, or the standard deviation, top of the bell curve was about 30%. It was atrocious. Everybody did bad. But that was probably the first exam in my collegiate career that I actually did poorly on, even though I averaged about as well as everybody else. But I looked at it and go, I didn't do anything. I didn't feel like I expressed the knowledge of the content. And that's kind of the way it went at Berkeley for some exams. Sometimes, what they're doing is giving us incredibly hard material, seeing what we can get down on paper, and expecting you to learn most of it via homework and self-study and reading the books and so on and so forth, which is why I said learning how to read a math book is important compared to just reading, say, a normal book. But as far as the academic culture, it was really cool to see. Going from PC to Berkeley, a lot of people at PC, I met a lot of people, David and all them too, that really cared about the material that they were studying. But I would say that they were far and few in between. A lot of people at PC it's just a stepping stone for them. And that's okay. It is what it is. But I was the kind of person that when I was in a class, I wanted to engage with the material, engage with the people, and really absorb everything that I could from it. And like I said, at PC, those people were far and few in between. At Berkeley, on the other hand, almost everybody had that same attitude. They wanted to engage. They wanted to be there. They wanted to get everything that they possibly could. And it was so cool to see that.
Yeah, the University of California environment, it's
right.
a whole other tier, man. I mean, I would argue you were actually jumping like 2 or 3 tiers when you start getting
right.
up there from like PC. And the same thing happened to me going into Calculus 1. I'm going,
right.
Holy crap, there's like hundreds of kids here. I think there was like a 400-person lecture hall for lower div. And everyone's going, yep, this is what we got to do. Hey, did you get this part? Do you remember the integral that he was talking about on the board and that theory? I've never seen that before, not even in my AP class.
Right. In comparison, my calculus class, which was the only one offered at PC, had about 25 people in it.
Radically different.
Which has its pros and cons, to be fair. And Dr. Gervasi was probably one of the best math professors I've ever had, to his credit. But yeah, the way that the students were engaging was radically different.
Yeah, did you see a bunch of other different like nerd tiers too? Like you've got your top 10%, which is, whoa, these guys have been learning it and just acing it for a long time, and now they're finally coming to a head, just like everybody else.
Oh yeah, no, there were definitely those, and I am very glad that when our professors graded our exams, those 1 or 2 sort of brainiacs, I would say, who got 100% on every single exam didn't actually set the curve, because we would have all been screwed.
Oh, for sure. Oh, one person got 95%. Well, I'll curve 5% for everyone. Meanwhile, everyone's in like the 40% category going, that's not good. And then you're all freaking out for the next midterm. And that happened to us, not only in math, it happened to us in organic chemistry. It happened to us in upper division. And I'm going, even in upper division, really? A 45% exam?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's crazy, but I think I'm better for it still. And it was very interesting to see those students who would do that well, because they were kind of quiet, stuck to themselves, and very quiet. Yeah. Sort of an oddball, if you will. But it was really cool, and I'm happy for them, but it also made me incredibly jealous. Like,
oh, jelly. I was jelly.
Oh, yeah, so jelly. Like, man, give me your brain, please. I want to be that good at math so I can just do all the math that I actually want to do. But, it is what it is. Yeah.
Not to mention the snowball of work that's happening during the quarter or during the semester in your case. I mean, every single week it feels like there's just more and more stuff that comes up until it finally comes to a head at the final. And then, bam! Okay, the class is over. Oh, we made it. Wow. Well, it's over.
And it was a weird thing to see, especially once you started taking your upper division math courses, because you would get sometimes you might get a 20 problem set, and they're pretty manageable, but those 20 problems would take you the whole week to do. And then you would get a 5 problem set, and you'd say, okay, I can maybe chunk this out in a day. You look at it at the end of class, put it in your backpack, or save the PDF, or store it however you store it. Say, I can do that. You go home or sit at the desk or sit in the library and try to chunk it out, and it takes you 5 hours to solve the first problem, because they're just that hard. And for those 5 problems, sometimes you might actually need the entire week just to solve them, maybe even just to solve a few of them. And boy, it was fun. Those are the kind of problems that I like, the ones that actually really make you think about every little detail, especially as far as the proof goes.
I'd argue that that's what UC courses are like. They're trying to it's not just about you learn this material, it's about how far can we stretch the students, and how far can we make their brains grow, and
how deep is your knowledge?
How deep is it? And they could go. I was surprised what kind of tests they can make as far as depth to a course that's like, let's say, Calculus 1 or Calculus 2.
Oh, yeah.
They could really stretch it to the point where I'm going, holy crap, am I in grad school or in undergrad?
Yeah, I was my last semester. I took a course in Galois theory, which is a course primarily about field extensions, algebraic structures, if you will. It's based abstract algebra part 2, or 3, depending on where you're at. But we had a GSI, graduate student instructor, who I had known my entire career at Berkeley, and he was probably one of the smartest guys I knew. And I asked him about one of the problems on our midterms. And I said, well, this is what I got, and this is, I explained it this way, so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty details because it's a handful of the problem. And I remember the problem off the top of my head, so I wrote it down verbatim. And he goes, look, I'll be honest with you, I'd have it down for an hour or two to figure this out. And this is probably one of the smartest guys that I know at Berkeley, who's a graduate student. He goes, yeah, I don't know. let me think about it. And we're expected to do on a 50-minute midterm.
That was the other joke I got with these TAs.
Right.
I'm going, wait, so it's going to take a person who's not only done the class, but who's a graduate student, who's getting paid to be in the university environment, typically, because they're a TA. And even them, they're going...
Are struggling.
They're struggling still.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And again, it goes back to that. How much can we stretch the students' depth and composition in this one class, regardless of the class, which was a big... It's a different way to teach. Because it's not the way like community college would do it, where it's about this finite amount of material. If you learn all of it, you're going to ace the exam. Instead, they just make it deeper and deeper and deeper to the point where you could probably take that class again, even if you got a B in it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great. It really pushes the envelope, so to say. And something that I do appreciate about it is it provokes a lot of conversation about the problems. If you got a 30 problem set for stuff covered in Calculus 1, say in high school, everybody's going to go home and kind of be able to do most of the problems, because they wouldn't assign you 30 problems to do in a week if they didn't expect you to be able to do those 30 problems. Versus, say, that problem on that midterm that we got, we sat there and probably had a 30 to 40-minute conversation about it, and going through all the ins and outs of it, and going over definitions and theorems and so on. And that conversation alone sort of strengthens your knowledge. It doesn't help me in hindsight because I didn't solve the problem, but next time maybe I'll be able to.
Or maybe on another problem that isn't quite as hard, maybe you'll go, oh, that theorem I was looking for, it didn't quite apply to that harder one, but maybe with this assumption I could use it here, and all of a sudden the problem's solvable.
Exactly.
But you had to really flush that out with someone else, going, hey, what's in our toolbox, and what could we assume that could work here? And then people will go, oh, no, that doesn't work because of these two initial conditions that they listed, which completely removes it, which is how a lot of these things get derailed. You're going, crap, we learned this theorem like 5 days ago, but it doesn't apply here because of these initial conditions. How do I bypass that?
Right. Yeah, a good way that I would say describe that sort of phenomena is if you were to go sort of down the street and ask somebody, hey, do you know what the Pythagorean... They probably know what the Pythagorean theorem is, but it's been pounded in our heads since we were in high school, and you've used it 50 bajillion times. That's a real number, by the way. And it's probably one of the most memed mathematical theorems of all. So, of course, everybody knows it. So there's that sort of discussion around it. So most people know it. And like you said, it'll come up later, and you go, oh, actually, I could use that one here. And you get that discussion with harder theorems at places like the UCs.
I remember there was a point in my particular mathematical career when I was a little kid, and my dad was going, crap, I can't solve this problem. And it was in algebra. I was 7th grade. I'm going, crap, he can't do it. I need to get on my, get off my butt and do it myself. That same mindset still needed to be applied when I was 20, dealing with partial differential equations. Crap, I can't sit on this. I need to learn.
Right.
And I felt like there was this fire under my butt the whole time with mathematics, between me in 7th grade as a 12-year-old versus me as a 21-year-old just finishing university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's quite the race.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now that we're actually in all this, did you learn Laplace or Fourier transforms, like crazy differential equations with matrices? What'd you learn?
Give me 1 second. Actually, I gotta pop.
Okay.
Sorry. This dog's gonna go crazy. Ow. Sorry.
Is your leg okay and your dog okay?
Yeah, my leg's all right. We just got a new puppy, and she goes crazy when big sister's taken out and she's not taken out. So
that's okay. Keep the peace in the household. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. To answer your question, yes, to an extent. I had the exposure to the Laplace transformation and solving systems of differential equations in differential equations. If you were to rack my brain about it today, I probably remember a lot of it, because once I stopped taking sort of my calculus courses, I dove headfirst into theory and more sort of the algebra side as opposed to but when I did do them, it was fun. And we had a bit of exposure to PDEs towards the end of the course. And my overall takeaway from that is, these are cool, these are interesting, the theory's interesting, I don't have the patience to do it.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. That was like 2 years of my life.
Yeah, I remember there were 2 class sessions in particular where we started with one problem on the first class, probably went through 4 or 5 whiteboards worth of work to get to the solution at the end of the second course, and we solved our one problem. And I said, well, that was kind of a waste of time. Not really, but I feel like I didn't get anything out of it other than solving some numerical problem, which, granted, could be worth it for somebody that needs to do that kind of work and actually enjoys those strict routine calculations. I don't.
So I have a story about PDEs. There was a time where it was a 2-hour class, okay, and we did it twice a week, and it was one problem, and right. He's going. So we had like 6 chalkboards. So
right,
and then he's running around and all that. He finally gets to like the end one, and he's not even halfway done with the problem, but he broke down the PDE into 4 ODEs. And the guy says, this is
as you have to do.
As you have to do in order to solve it. And he goes, the solution is obvious. And I go, what? These are hard ODEs.
Yeah,
These are...
Yeah, just apply the Laplace transformation and you get it.
I was pissed. So I quoted that in 2012 when Professor Struve, the same guy who uses a gamer tag, that guy, he said the solution is obvious, and we all left the class going, well, what the hell? We're not even halfway done yet.
That's the meme in the math community. Proof is let as an exercise for the reader, because they expect you to be able to do it. Meanwhile, it's probably one of the hardest proofs in the chapter.
Yeah. Disclaimer: the hardest part was solved here, but the rest of it's just kind of grunt work. Go ahead. And for some people, they would consider ODEs not grunt work. That's a lot of physical stuff you got to do it. And Laplace by itself, when I first heard of, you have to convert something to go into a different frame or a different domain,
right,
to solve it there, to invert it back, I'm going, oh crap, how am I supposed to remember all of like 1 over s is equal to 1 and these other ratios that to a space that I don't really understand. Like I don't understand the Laplace domain as far as what it means once you convert it into it. But I do understand once we actually get it back. Fourier was the same thing, but then I heard Fourier had to do with like communications. So
right, signal processing.
Right, signal processing. And I'm going, okay, I understand that part. Where the heck's Laplace?
Yeah. Well, he's hidden in there somewhere.
Probably, and it's just for solving problems in general with ODEs. And they even came up in process control, where we're doing Laplace, and this is some heavy Laplace transforms. Like, we're back to 40% test results because that's half of the exam. And I'm just so glad I lived through it. But we did the same thing with our like 8-person study group, going, how the heck are we supposed to dig into the Laplace domain? And then it's just someone comes up with an idea and it gets transferred down the line, and then we all try it. Maybe one smart person goes, not quite. This is where we're wrong. And then we have to start all over again.
Right. Hence, I don't have the patience for it.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, you messed up on your sign. Well, sorry. Do it again.
Exactly.
I commend that, and I don't exactly remember all my ODE's training, but I don't have the patience to do it again. So it'll probably come up eventually someday, but it's easier to relearn it from scratch the first time. So I at least am appreciative of that.
Yeah, I'm just glad that it's done and it's put to bed.
It's over.
did I tell you the moment where I rage quit math? Like the moment I didn't want to learn any higher level math.
Okay.
There was one story, and this is in differential equations, and it was when you could take differential equations or ODEs and mix them with matrices. The minute I saw linear algebra enter it, I said, that's it. I'm done. You guys can have it. It was the last 2 weeks of differential equations, and I saw that. I'm going, you son of a... There is no... Okay, that... Like, pull the cord, man. I was so done when I saw that, because you saw that your world was about to get 2.5 times harder just because matrices are now involved with ODEs. Yeah, that was it. That was sophomore year of my career.
I was never a particularly big fan of linear algebra per se, and once we started doing Laplace transformations, and then you sort of convert it and put it all in this big matrix so you can solve your system because you had 4 equations and 4 initial conditions, and you're trying to get all of them done at once. I was like, okay, if I have to. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't a big fan of it. And then once Berkeley started, I find out, well, actually, linear algebra is probably the most important classes you can ever take, because you can use it just about everywhere, and it has been beaten to death by every mathematician. Almost every mathematician per se. And then I went, well, okay, actually start to like this stuff. And now it's like linear algebra a lot. So much to the point that I'm actually going to I've started before, but I've never made a lot of headway. And now that I think I'm going to have some more time on my hands, I'm really going to dig into what's called algebraic geometry, which is, as you might, I say is, a part of algebraic geometry is sort of, instead of solving linear equations, systems of linear equations, you're actually solving polynomials in different fields and rings and so on and so forth. So you're not just working with the real numbers or complexes. You might be working with, say, a finite field, trying to solve this system of polynomials, and you don't even know what that polynomial sort of looks like in a field.
So polynomials in a field. Okay.
Kind of. So a field is an algebraic structure. As you heard me refer to, structure is kind of something that we throw around loosely, and we just assume everybody that knows math and knows. But a field is an example of a field is the real numbers. You can add, subtract, you can divide. Everything has an inverse. Everything, well, almost has an inverse. Zero doesn't.
Yeah, not zero. That's a bad
right.
idea.
And that's the only exception. You can divide by zero in a field. You can't add an inverse. You can divide by the multiplicative inverse, which in the real numbers is 1, and so on and so forth. So your additive inverse, your 0, has some special conditions to it in how it interacts with everything else in the field. And your multiplicative inverse does as well. But you can generally do all these nice things that we know how to do real numbers in a field. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's sort of what a field is.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But then you can, go ahead.
Oh, the field. We use fields for a little bit, but mostly it's like the direction concept, right? It's not just like a number. There's like a number that goes to a direction. So we used it in the sense of like a physical phenomenon. So like something going somewhere. So like a wave.
Oh, yeah, okay. I think we might be looking at sort of different fields, but
yeah, that's again application math. Right. I'm coming from the chemical engineering background where they're forcing down application mathematics that's super theoretical, and then in your case, you're talking about just going into math land. How far did we even get in the exploration of mathematics?
Right. Yeah, it's fun stuff. Anyway, next, where are we?
I think we're on question 6. That's what math concepts are so theoretical that they should probably stay within the academic world and never leave.
Personally, I would say none, because like eventually there might be something that comes along. There are fields. There are areas of math. I didn't want to use category because that's the name of it. It's called category theory, and it is, you have algebra, then you have abstract algebra, and then category theory is kind of an abstraction of abstract algebra, if you will, but it is slowly finding its way to application, say computer science. So like, I don't really think there are a lot of things that should strictly stay in academics, at least long term. We had Fermat's little theorem come out, which is it's a theorem that says when looking, say, in a finite prime numbers, which it's. Did you ever work in modular?
Modular what? You cut out for a little bit.
Modular arithmetic?
No, none of that. We didn't do any.
Okay, so it's basically clock arithmetic, and what it says is if you're in a, if you're on a clock with not prime number faces, with an amount of faces that are prime numbers. So if it's for example, if it had seven faces instead of 12. If you're in a field like that, if you take any number aside from 0 and you multiply it by itself, in this case, if we're working in the field with the finite field with 7 numbers exactly, and you take, say, 2 and you multiplied it by itself 7 minus 1 times, which is 6 times, and you went all the way around the clock that many times, it would take you back to 1. And it does that for every single number in that field except for 0, because 0 is special.
Sure. So if you took 3, if you took 19, or you took 17, and you apply it to this clock face field, you'll always end up back at 1.
Right. And a good way to think about it is you think about it in remainders. So if you're in the field 7, what you're looking at really is the remainder of every number when you divide it by 7. So, for example, if you look at 14 and then you divide that by 7, it'll take you back to 0. So on and so forth. You took 15, get back to 1. So what it's saying is if you take, say, 4, and it's called Z, for this case, let's use Z7 is what the field is sort of called, or Z7Z is fine. And you took 4, and you took 4 to the sixth power. You would find that as you divide it by 7, eventually you'll get some remainder. That remainder is going to be 1. Is the way that it works. So we would say that for any number n in a finite field ZPZ, and you look at n to the p, its remainder is always going to be 1.
No matter what.
No matter what. And that's special because, one, you're working because you're working basically with a prime number there. It would be different if it was 6 or 8 or something like that. But prime numbers are special. And that happens to be a special case of what happens when you look in those particular fields. And this theorem is something that came about and was solved in 1640, a long time ago.
That's a long time ago.
Right. And it sounds, I would say, relatively abstract. I wouldn't say it's completely abstract, but that's me versus somebody, if you were to talk to on the street about it, they would say, what the hell are you talking about? You are in goofy land. I don't understand what that's all about. But about 1977, a few guys said, well, how can I send a message from my computer to your computer and actually encrypt it and make it sort of secure so nobody else can see it? Well, what they found is that they can sort of encode this little password on it, and those password basically comes from taking, say, 2 prime numbers, and then you are exactly how it works. But you're looking at 2 prime numbers and in a bunch of different backwards ways, and then you're including some other stuff. And eventually, it turns out that the only person that can sort of read your message is the person who also knew what those prime numbers were and has the key to unlocking that message. Because, well, think about it. You can look at sort of, p minus 1, and if I gave you a 10 trillion digit prime number, and then I gave you minus 1, and then I said, look at 2 that actually multiply together to make that number, there are a bajillion numbers that could actually multiply to give you that number. But there's really only going to be a few special numbers that apply to it a certain way.
You know what? That's kind of cool, because I'm getting more of a appreciation for prime numbers now that I know that there's some kind of computer aspect to it. So it's a way to, it's kind of like the Enigma code they did back in the 40s, but instead they've decided we're going to make it even, 10 trillion. I mean, a prime number in the 10 trillion range. I'm not going to guess that. No way. Yeah. So that kind of makes me feel a little more warm and fuzzy on the security aspect.
It makes me feel warm and fuzzy because prime numbers are the backbone of that, and in particular, Fermat's little theorem is the backbone of that. But the sort of beauty in that is it was solved in 1640 by some guy who was just playing around with it because he didn't have a TV back then. He didn't have a phone to look at or anything like that. He was, numbers for him was fun. Solves this thing, and then 300 some odd years later, somebody says, actually, I can use this to send a message, and everybody else will know that for us too.
So maybe we just haven't found the application for a lot of the stuff yet. So it might be like in 2100 where some of this stuff might actually appear and be, maybe we could use that somewhere. So, but we can't use it yet until the proper opportunity and, I guess, brainiacs arise to the occasion to try and put it in.
Somebody's got to be smart enough to that we can fit this piece of the puzzle in right there, and boom, we have security.
I gotta say, and that's only the 17th century. That's well like into the Isaac Newton era,
right?
And it took to the 70s to finally use it for application.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, another example of I say another example, a big example of that would be sort of negative numbers. You know, they used to host math solving competitions or problem solving competitions, I guess, where they're solving their whole goal is to solve very simple algebraic equations that you could probably hand to a fourth grader, or not a fourth grader. So let's say a seventh grader.
Seventh grader, okay.
And you would say, x plus 4 equals 0. Well, what x satisfies that equation? Well, you solve for both sides. You find that x is negative. Well, somebody in the 1300s would throw his hands up and say that's preposterous. Negative numbers don't exist. You can't physically grasp a negative. What? Blasphemy! You're a heretic. Get out of here. He's done. Now, come to find out, negative numbers are actually a very real thing. But if that had solely stayed within the academic community at the time, we wouldn't be where we are today.
No, and I heard that no kidding. And I heard about how the Eastern world in the Arabia came up with the concept of zero. We did not have like a mathematical concept of zero until well into the Dark Ages.
Right. Well, we have the Eastern sort of communities play sort of a major foundational role in math as we know it. I mean, algebra is basically started as algebra, or however you want to say it. I probably botched it, but that's what it is. And we basically use an Arabic number system anyway. We probably wouldn't have math as we know it without that, And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the Sumerians over in Iraq. They're the ones who came up with a concept of even arithmetic, the concept of even putting numbers together and finding a way to add up all of their bills they were handing to people and transcripts on, here's your invoice on grain. Here you go. It's on a stone. Took forever to make. Yeah. Finally, there you go.
Yeah. Well, how do I mark down that you owe me 4 pieces of grain? Well, I mark on your tab, but what do I mark yours? Well, that would actually be a negative number on yours, but it doesn't exist at the time. But you can sort of fast forward that to a sort of a modern day aspect. It's not necessarily a thought. It's been around for quite a while now, but the whole concept of imaginary numbers. What imaginary numbers are is basically what imaginary numbers are is the whole complex plane is a field extension of the real numbers. Some guy came along and just like somebody had to be the first person to say -1's actually a thing. There had to be some other person that came along. What if we just say the square root of -1 is actually a thing? What if we just stop writing it off? We don't know what it is, but let's just say it's something and find out what happens. And everything blew up from there. You've got hyperbolic geometry, complex geometry, analysis, topology, and you have very real-world applications to the biggest ones is electrical engineering. It's used almost everywhere. But if some guy 300-400 years ago didn't say, well, what if we actually see if it's a thing and see what happens if we do it? We, like I said, again, we wouldn't necessarily be where we are today. A lot of the fact that you and I are basically talking on Discord right now, there's probably a lot of imaginaries that went into play in some aspect of it. It's probably not the building block of it, but it had to come up somewhere.
It did, and because now we can just say it's a thing of some kind. It may be an imaginary number. We don't know quite how it relates to it, but we do know if you square it enough times, that becomes as real number as anything else. So that's the other thing. If we can convert it, maybe there's a part of the graph that starts to become real again in a
Right.
particular condition,
Right.
and which it
And the
does.
whole, yeah, but it all spawned from a very simple polynomial equation. What if x squared plus 1 is equal to 0? And you get, basically Gauss law theory is one of the biggest things that's sort of going to study those sort of field extensions and how they relate to one. So, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's highly abstract. You can get into working with fields and field extensions of fields that you don't even look like a field, but they are. And that might be way more abstract than the way that the modern day electrical engineer is using imaginary numbers, but that doesn't mean it can't be appreciated eventually someday.
And it does for imaginary numbers. Isn't there like the e to the I pi is equal to -1 or
Yeah, that is Euler's formula, I believe, is what it's called.
right? Then there's an Euler's theorem, which is something else.
Yes, and I honestly have to look up what this is again. I don't off the top of my head. It's been so long, but Euler's formula is it's very much appreciated because it takes the 5 biggest numbers, not the biggest numbers, but 5 of the most sort of popular numbers, and fits them all together nicely in this equation. And you can there. Expansion of e to the x and then plugging all these things. E to the I pi plus 1 is 0. But something that's actually really neat, I think, if you look at, is once you start studying books now, you'll find that it's actually kind of trivial because of the way that you can describe a complex. You can describe a complex sines and cosines, basically is what it is, and then you plug in I pi, and you get e to the I pi is e to the I pi plus 1. And it's at that point it's very trivial, but there's so many other complex ways to go about describing it.
Sure, it's kind of like a gray area of math. And are you still plugged in, Joe?
Yep, here we go.
All right, just making sure. Just cutting out a little bit, but
yeah. Sorry.
No worries. What you're getting at is, it's trivial. It's not exactly 100% on that. It's more like in the border of what you consider mathematical truth.
Right.
And I think that's exactly why they brought it up is, well, what if we could play that gray area? Because now you can actually convert back into a real number.
Well, kind of a real number, but it's more something that you can grasp realistically, I suppose.
Something that you can now see it again. It's not necessarily just an imaginary graph. Yeah. And I always thought that was interesting when we ran into imaginary numbers, even in chemical engineering, because you'd sometimes have part of the graph that's imaginary and part of it that's real. So then you'd have to say, okay, I'm making a big assumption here that the real part of the graph is going to be the part of the solution that I have to pick from to finish the problem.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of cool because you have to differentiate that.
Yeah, the whole idea of visualizing sort of what complex numbers like as you get into, I guess, sort of complex. You this whole idea of Riemann surfaces, and the best example I've seen of Riemann surfaces is somebody trying to describe what x squared plus I want to say 2, because that ends up giving you an imaginary number still. What the graph of it looks like, and the best way that they ended up describing what the graph of it looks like is they took 2 complex planes and stacked them on top of each other and sort of traced out what it does as you sort of look at these sort of little solutions on this curve trace out as you go from this complex plane to this complex plane. And the way that you do that is we start drawing it on the, and it goes in this very weird direction that doesn't even make sense. But once you stack that bottom, you can see actually where it's being traced out sort of in between the two of them. But to make the graph actually look nice, you sort of have to bend and meld and these sort of two complex planes to make this nice looking sort of three-dimensional thing. And you get into Riemann surface, and it gets incredibly complex, but so much to the point that I probably would ever even touch it because I couldn't get close to sort of grasping what it actually is at its heart. But it's probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life.
And this is coming again from someone, you majored in math, and yet there's still, and I went into the STEM fields in engineering, and both of us are still going, there's so much more to mathematics that would take probably a lifetime to really appreciate some of the farther things that we could solve. And that to me is a big, like, mind-blown moment.
Right. And it's also sort of sad at the same time, I would say, because there is just in mathematics alone, there is so much math out there, and it's all so cool, and I will never be able to know all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have what we call polymaths. We would call it's people like Euler, Descartes, Riemann, a big one of Fermat. They're people that sort of at its birth could branch out in all these different fields of math because there wasn't a lot of groundbreaking work done to them at the time that they could play here, dabble here, play here. Well, now if they wanted to dabble in, say, just the route of analysis has beaten so hard that on its own route it has probably 50,000 different branches in the different areas that you can go to. We can't do that anymore. You kind of gotta pick a field and go. And I happened to pick number theory as a field that I really like, which was, I think, unfortunate me, because number theory is probably one of the most beautiful things out there, and it's something that the layman can sort of appreciate. You can describe problems in number theory in a way that is nice and easier for people to understand, but to actually sort of solve that problem is miles of work, and you will go into caverns and holes, stuff that you didn't even know was there, and it doesn't even look like number theory, just to be able to solve that problem.
And that's just one problem. Again, it goes back to what we were getting at. There's so much of a span of mathematics. We only just even got started with the stuff that we agree upon. Then there's the math that people are starting to say, well, what about all this gray area that we could still use maybe later in the future, maybe 100 years out, 200 years out, we can finally start putting that math into the curriculum because we've agreed upon its application.
It's standardized.
Yeah, and that's the other scary part. Differential equations was the border for me when I started to see, oh, we can't solve them all. We can't. There are some diff EQs that we are limited to solving. And that's where
you actually have to take take a numerical approach. Write a program, something in MATLAB or Python that can crunch all these numbers way faster than you possibly ever could, and sort of get you a numerical approach to what the solved version of this differential equation looks like. But the cool part about it is that we actually have the ability to write those programs. If you were to give that to somebody in the 1600s who probably hadn't made is and say, well, you can't actually solve this one, but I really want what happens when you plug in these initial conditions. Oh, crap, let me take the next 10 years and write out 500,000 pages of calculations to find out what it looks like. Whereas, you got programs now you can write in that differential equation, say I can't solve it, give me the best numerical approach, give me the best method to numerically approach this, or it might, make a very polygonal rough estimation of sort of what your system of differential equations might look like, and then give you a numerical approach and say, well, that's what happens in initial conditions. You actually get this really cool thing that happens.
And that's a kind of cool bypass loop. It's a cool bypass loop because mathematicians are always saying, well, how do we do this through theorems and getting the full solution? And whereas we now have programs which have a really high quality control if you've got the right boundary conditions. And all of a sudden, well, we can get about 99.5% of the iteration complete. Here you go. And it's
close enough.
Close enough. Close enough.
Within margin of error.
And that's crazy because now that computers have really bypassed a lot of those theorems, because now we're taking a completely iterative base instead of trying to get the 100% solution, whether it's a summation or it's a polynomial or just whatever. Now you've actually got something that is close enough, and it saves us radical amounts of time. And that's probably taken our fields to a completely new level now that we have this technology.
Right. But it had to start somewhere. It had to start as an idea. It had to start as a theory. It had to start a theorem or a conjecture even. That is, of course, how it started. It started as a conjecture. But now that we've come so far from this thing is conjecture and it's theoretical to this thing's helping me build bridges is quite beautiful. And that's, I'm more of a theoretical mathematician and I appreciate it. I do not want to play around in applied mathematics because the theory is so much cooler. The theory is so much richer. But where and when it's applied is very cool to see. And I think it is very to know and actually even ask those questions of where am I actually going to apply this? Because someday I'm hoping to look at that student and say, I don't know, I don't care. It's highly abstract. But somebody could use it 700 years later.
Well, and in your case, you're really on the border between math and philosophy, which is like that line that you're playing. You're really on that line with your interests. And that's to me is kind of nuts because I always thought that it was more like philosophy on the left and then mathematician on the right. Really, it's more like a circle.
Yeah.
And then there's the... Yeah, right. Yeah. And then you're back at... Because that's how the ideas start. And you have to be kind of a philosopher if you're going to be a theoretical mathematician. But you have to also know the application of math. So there's this... Well,
you kind of have to know the applications of math.
Yeah, you do. And
they tell you have to start learning it, in the first 2 years. And after the first 2 years, they can say, oh, that's good enough. If you want to go dive off the deep end into theory, go have fun, play.
And that's what it is. It's a giant sandbox to try and get to the next level because you don't really know how you're going to run into it. And chances are you probably won't, but it's just going to be a lot of fun seeing, well, what's already been tried, what hasn't been tried, what other options are there, the what ifs, the questions, which is a lot of the fun of theoretical math. It's posing the question and conjecture and seeing what you can come up with it just by discussion and seeing how far we've already gotten with math to begin with. Sort
of playing with the math is probably the best way to describe it, and some people do describe it. You're not working the math problem, playing with it, and you should play with it because that's how ideas happen. That's how you learn. You learn by playing with it, and I think that's sort of one of the things that is very sad to see about high school mathematics education. It's kind of pounded in your head. You have to learn this because you have to get the right answer. Really, you should just play around with the ideas of math. Play around with these numbers. See what happens. And then, maybe at the end, plug it in. If it doesn't work, well, it doesn't work. But you tried, and you know why it doesn't work now. Now it's just, okay, you need to subtract 4 from both sides and get that x is negative 4. Well, why do I care what negative 4 is? Well, I don't care. You got the answer.
I think you're really getting at something that I think people miss. Well, because people really just want to get, I just want the application. It's what you said in the beginning. I just want the thing in my toolbox so now I can solve these problem sets, which is so rigid. That's not what
Right.
math was for. That's only one sliver of it. You kind of
Right.
want to see, well, what if I decide to do this? And then it's maybe a homework assignment instead would be x plus 4 is equal to 0. But on the next problem, I want you to do 5 different sets that you made. So 5 different problems that you made that would make this problem different. And see
Right.
if you could screw around with it. And,
Yeah.
well, what if I made it x plus 4 parentheses squared is equal to 0? What if I made it square root, trying it to make it a little more
Yeah.
complex and have them participate in the question posing instead of just being told you have to solve this. You have to solve this.
Right. It's a lot of fun stuff, but there's pushback from everybody. Mathematicians say you should have fun with it and play. Then, the other half of the world says, well, why? Well, math is a tool, and yes, it's a tool, but it's also something that you can enjoy. And I think a lot of that gets lost in translation sometimes.
For sure, and I think a lot of it's the time frame. We have only so much time to learn this much material, so we just need to be rigid and just get through all of it. But
Yeah.
that's
I mean, there are practical reasons to it, but it's just sad to see so many people losing interest in math because
for years. Yeah. I mean, and then for then on, forget this. I'm going to go learn something else. The math is not on my priority list.
yeah, man, it's so sad to see. My cousin actually, and she keeps talking. She keeps talking about math classes, and I said, well, you should take trigonometry because she's at that point where she can pick that path and take trig or take stats, and she's done. And I said, take trig, and then take pre-cal, and then take calculus. Like, see how far the rabbit hole goes. See what you like. And she goes, no, I just want to take stats and be done. Why? That's so boring. If you get to a point in math and then you finally say, okay, that's it, I'm out. I don't want to learn anymore. Fine, but don't sell yourself short because you just want to be done with it. Take it as far as you can go because I promise you, are going to learn something much more valuable on the way.
I agree.
And that's not to say that stats is valuable. Stats is probably one of the most used areas of mathematics in everyday life. But to consider it a stopping point is sad.
Well, already, I plan to stop here. That was the problem. Before you even take anything else, you say, I plan to stop here. For me,
right.
I'm glad I had the opportunity to run into linear algebra differential equations combining, saying, all right, that's it.
Now I'm out.
Now I'm out. I know for sure that's my limit. As opposed to, well, I'm going to put an arbitrary limit on my education.
And then that is the end of my mathematical career, starting at, say, 18. And you're done. There is so much out there, though.
Way more than that. And it's really the fact of the gray area math and talking to, if I just took time to talk to the TAs in grad school and math and being a mathematician, they're going, yeah, I'm doing this project. It's going to take a long time. Some of them are programming based. Some of them aren't. Some of them particularly philosophy based. There's so much to dig into. Granted, the chances of failure is probably pretty high, but that's not why you're doing it. Again, it's the act of wrestling with the problem.
Right, and there is value in those failures. You're not going to do it right the first time ever. You shouldn't be punished too severely for not getting it right. But like I said, the idea that you have to get it right kind of ingrained in all of our heads. But there's value in it.
Sure, if we can't let people fail in this stuff, and now it really makes people think, crap, I can't fail at this. I need to get it done. I'm rigid.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of mindset's probably a big killer of people being interested in math altogether. Right. And science, too. Science, same way. You have to get the right answer. You got to get 3 molar hydrochloric acid as your answer for whatever we're doing. Wait, no, I kind of just wanted to figure out what molar means first. I feel like a lot of people get left behind in just science, too. Same thing.
And that's not to say that if you fail, yes, you should be allowed to. Of course, that's not the case. But you shouldn't be discouraged for it.
So speaking of failures and discouragement,
Actually, I'm gonna move you over here.
I'm being moved.
So I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta charge my iPad apparently.
Yeah, quick. We're not done with the stream yet.
There we go.
Okay. Well, one of the last questions is, what was something that you overcame when you were in like being a mathematician's undergraduate, and why was it significant to you?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things for me was I actually have to put in the time. I actually have to do sort of all this studying now. Otherwise, I am going to be way left behind because everybody is going miles faster, and taking calculus courses, and so on and so forth. And it was, I don't want to say fairly easy to me, but it was something that came secondhand because I had loved it so much. But then you get to, say, your first analysis course, and that's a killer. You don't like it, and if you don't like that field of math, because granted, by the time that you probably get to that point where you're taking real analysis or these heavy upper division math courses, you've probably picked something in math that you actually have an interest in, and it's going to lie in one field or. And if you're taking an analysis course and you theory, analysis probably won't be that fun. Granted, that's not to say that it is like that for everybody. People love all aspects of math, and don't get me wrong, I do too. But I didn't like work. I can appreciate it for what it is. Man, solving problems in analysis were killer. I did not have fun with it. But you just gotta buck up and pick up your work ethic at that point and say, well, crap, I actually can't learn this thing sort of through osmosis anymore. You actually have to sit down and learn how to read a math. You have to be able to solve these problems as you go on. And I would say a good chunk of my learning upon getting into Berkeley was just sitting down there and playing with these thoughts, playing with these ideas, and realizing, like I said, that you can spend 2 hours on a get it wrong, and then the next hour you get it right.
We need getting away from that mindset, and I had to do the same thing. Where, crap, I guess gotta get this done in 5 hours. Maybe you need another 5 hours. Mm-hmm. These problem sets aren't so rigid like they were in high school, where they just give you a week's worth of homework assignments. We have to change our paradigm, especially when the clock's ticking. I mean, you're now you're really got skin in the game when you're in undergrad, where in, let's say, in high school, I mean, skin in the game is just not the same unless you're going somewhere. You want to go somewhere. Okay, then the skin in the game is hot. But in your case, you're going, whatever, I'm going to cruise by this and just learn through osmosis.
And then something eventually stops you and says, you're not going to do that anymore. You can't do that anymore. And you just kind of have to accept that and get over that hurdle. Because eventually, especially, in these sort of STEM fields, your brain's going to hit some point and go, I have no idea what I'm doing. I can stop the buck here and transition and move somewhere else or do something, but I can't solve it. Your brain literally does not have the capability to get past it. But if you play around with it long enough, eventually you're going to get it.
So a big thing being just having to buck up and say, I can't just give myself all the time in the world. I really have to put what's important up front, even if I have to learn it at a rate that I don't like.
Yeah, and that's kind of a big idea in that too, is putting what's important to be, and at some point you're going to have to take stock in, especially in your collegiate career, you're going to have to take stock of, okay, what really matters, what can I give up, what can I ditch here, what can I get rid of, and keep the things that are sort of the most valuable to me around. And that's something that you're also going to hit at some point, and you just have to figure it out and give some shit up, but it is what it is.
That's correct. I've got one last question for you, Joe, and this is for people that, for anyone that wanted to get into math or they wanted to do kind of something similar to what you're doing. What advice would you give them?
So for the people that, I guess I can speak towards the people that want to do math. A big one from the conversation that we just had, or the question that we just discussed, is at some point you're going to have to put in the work. And if you get to that in calculus 1 and you are struggling to understand what an integral is, that's all right. If you really like it still, keep going. Even the most brilliant mathematicians, granted, they probably hit it a lot later at some point, but even the most brilliant mathematicians struggle with something somewhere at some point. If you hit it early and you love it, keep going. It's going to be worth it if you truly do love it. Secondly is actually learning how to read a math book. When I was taking calculus, I was skimming through pages, taking notes here and there, and I would cover a chapter in 30 minutes. Oop. Can you hear me?
Still here.
Yeah. Okay. I'd cover a chapter in 30 minutes, and then solve a few problems. But I was mostly solving problems not based off of what I read, but based off of the class and my notes and so on and so forth. Which, granted, did help me because I was just solving the problems. I was getting a lot of practice in. But actually learning how to read and digest everything that you're reading on those pages before you is eventually going to really pay off. Because if you just read through them real quick and you get to a point where you're trying to solve problems without actually digesting a lot of that material beforehand, you're not going to be able to solve the problems, actually. I mean, it's as simple as that. You're going to get to a point, crap, I don't understand that theorem. I don't understand why these two vector spaces are interacting with each other the way that they are. And that comes from digesting that information. When you read a math book, you really want to pay attention to literally every single word is going to be important. And I took that for granted. People, you would say on forums, yeah, if you really learn how to read a math book and read a math book right, you should be spending about 30 minutes to an hour per page digesting every word, paying attention to every little logical conclusion from this sentence to that one. How does this proposition follow from that one? And then, at some point, you're going to have to start proving the theorems for yourself. If you're reading a math book and you're on, page 38 and it's got 3 theorems on it, write those theorems down, play with some examples, and then see if you can prove it yourself. That's how you read a math book.
Yeah, and it's not literary. Literary is
right.
that's like maybe 30% of it, just so you can actually read and see what's going on. But it's the playing around and seeing the examples, and it's way more interactive that you have to be with a math book than just reading it.
Right, and challenging the ideas too. Granted, you can challenge it, and you're probably wrong if you do, but you should, and see if you can find a counterexample, or and eventually you get to a point where you can't find a counterexample. Okay, well, why can't I? Well, the theorems tell you why, but now you know from example why.
Yeah, that's the Iron Man concept. That's the
right.
Let's see if I can make this as strong as possible, and let's see if I can just throw as much stuff at it until it falls down. If it doesn't fall down, that theorem is accurate and I can use it.
Yeah.
And if not, that means there's only particular boundary conditions where you can use it. And that's something to be like, whoa, okay, this is limited application. Don't use it for everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and now you get to a point where, okay, you did the reading, you learned how to read a math book. Now you actually have to solve problems. That's how you're going to learn best. And if you're 14, it sucks to hear, but that homework is actually good for you. You're getting practice on math. If your homework was go home and format a letter and write a letter like you would write to your mom. Okay. I mean, you're going to get some value in that. And don't get me wrong, it's not entirely invaluable, but learning from that versus learning from doing 30 math problems, failing on the first 15, and aha, I got it, that's actually how you're really going to learn. You know, if I told you to construct a letter, it's probably going to be a little bit easier than, say, solving 20 ordinary differential equations.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Right.
Even for UC, that's quite a bit.
Right, it is. But, if you were doing it for 3 years and you had a lot of practice in solving ODEs, you're going to get it.
Well said, Joe.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else to add? You got through all my questions.
Yeah, I got a few things on that still. For the people that are particularly interested in math but know that they don't want to end up in academics, supplement your degree with economics, computer science, business, something. If you know 100% for certain you don't want to supplement. I didn't do that, and it's also not something I'm particularly I'm not beating up myself. I'm not beating myself for it because I knew I wanted to go to theory, but it's still definitely good to supplement with something if interested. And then I got a few books that I think everybody should read, especially the early mathematician that wants to get into mathematics or at least have a rough idea of what mathematics beyond differential equations is How to Prove It by Daniel Vellman. It is a good idea to introduce you into proofs actually are, the logical sort of construction of proofs and really all the logic behind proofs, sort of, to say. And it's, like I said, it's going to be fundamental in teaching you how to do that stuff later on, because at some point, everybody's going to expect you to know how to write a proof and construct a proof. A book of abstract algebra by Charles Pinter. It's probably one of my favorite abstract algebra books. It was also probably one of my first abstract algebra books because it was $10. It's very cheap. I'm not advertising it. Pick it up if you want to, but it is one of the cheapest and best abstract algebra books I've ever read, and it was a pleasure to read. It's very interactive. And what he typically tries to do is give you bare bones what a definition, what these definitions and theorems are, ring field, and then actually prove these very little tiny details about it, but he breaks it down in such a way that it's easy for you to go along and digest it. He's not going to give you this incredibly complex proof and expect you to prove every little step of the way up to it. He gives you all the problems and then solve the big one. So it's a very interactive book, very explained. And then once you got that and you sort of got your big boy pants on, Principles of Mathematical Analysis by Walter Rudin. It's probably one of the hardest math books I've ever worked through, ever, period. And it is invaluable. But yeah, get your big boy pants on. Before you do that, I would definitely recommend those 3 books in that specific order.
Cool.
An aspiring mathematician.
I'll put them in the description of this video just for reference, so if anyone wants to know.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that those PDFs somewhere, but they very well might be. There's a good chance.
Nowadays, anything's possible, Joe.
Right.
Heck, I might even have one of those.
Yeah. They're probably some of the best books you can read, and they're fun.
Cool. Joe, thanks again for explaining everything about your mathematical history and some of this. I had fun too. This was It's not very many days I get to talk about math anymore. So.
Yeah. Same, honestly. Wish there were more people to talk math with at the level that I actually really want to talk about it, but it is what it is.
It is what
and
it
I'll
is.
just play it.
Right. If you were in a university setting, you'd have that all the time. But,
Mhm.
I mean, we're both not in that right now.
Right. I'm still content to sit around and work math problems on my own, read here and there. Like I said, I'm probably going to start reading a algebraic geometry book here, and hopefully I'm actually going to start it and get some real groundwork on it. And that's another really cool thing about math is you can do it on your own if you really want to and know how to. You don't have to go to some special shop to do it. It's in a book. You can find the book.
I'm looking forward to hearing about some of your developments with algebraic geometry at some point.
I will keep you informed. It's going to be a headache and a half, but I'm going to like it.
Awesome. Well, that's it, everyone. Thanks again for watching. I'm going to end the stream here, Joe, so stand by. Thanks again for coming on, too, by the way.
Yeah, that was fun. Probably got a little nervous.